Delegates, please take your seat. Our chief guest, Mr. Amita Kant, is here. We will like to now start the proceedings of this summit. Please take your seat. I invite Mr. Dubey, Chairperson CA. We have with us Mr. Deepak Sharma from Australia. We are honored with his presence here. Our knowledge partners, Mr. Raghumata Rao is here. So with your permission, we are now making a beginning of the seminar. I'll request all the dignitaries on the dais to please come down and light the traditional lamp before we make the proceedings to start. Please come. Thank you very much, all the dignitaries on the dais, for lighting the lamp. This is our traditional Hindu tradition. We get the blessings of the Ma to make the beginning. This is our 19th Power Forum. This is our main event every year. We have been holding this event for the last so many years. This year, the theme is changing role of power sector in achieving higher GDP growth. Since there has been a talk that India wants to have a march on a higher GDP, we thought let us analyze what will be the role of the power sector in achieving that higher GDP growth. With these opening remarks, may I now invite our President, Mr. Anil Razdan, former Secretary Power, to come and give the welcome address. I'll talk a little later.
A very good morning to all of you. It's my privilege to welcome Mr. Amitabh Kant, CEO of the Niti Aayog, Professor Deepak Sharma, Mr. S.D. Dubey, Chairman CA, Mr. H.L. Bajaj, who's heading the Power Forum, Mr. Amarjit Singh, Mr. Bambani, distinguished colleagues and seniors, and participants. The object of meeting today, in a theme a little different from what we've been talking about in the past, as you can see, is the changing role of power sector in achieving higher GDP growth. Now, power, or in fact, is an essential component of energy And energy, as you all know, is virtually a sine qua non for attaining growth. And India has a particular focus on power and energy because, as you know, that although we have 18% of the world's population, we're the third largest economy, but we consume only 6% of the primary energy consumption. And it was assessed in 2013 that out of a population of 1.3 billion, nearly 240 million are without access to electricity. And 840 million use primary fuels. And access to electricity is 81%. It's come up substantially now. I presume it's about 85% now. Clean cooking is only 33%. The per capita energy consumption was 33% of the global average. And mercifully, our share in global fossil fuel consumption was 5%, and CO2 emissions as a share of global emissions was only 6%, and 30% of the global average of emissions, per capita emissions. Now this brings us to the point of why the power sector having an important role. Electricity is, I think, the cleanest end use that you can hope for attaining any economic activity. You have, in our country, what are the issues? Today we have to provide energy access, availability and affordability to our populace. Rural household electrification, luckily, has been proceeding well, but still some way to go. We've got to a short 24-hour electricity supply. Well, at a time when I was power secretary, we had energy deficit and peak deficit in double digits. In fact, to be very honest, I always suspected it was about 30%, the peak deficit. Luckily, today we are claiming that we are about 2% deficit. But I at times doubt it, because unless you have 24/7 electricity supply assured by the distributor, you cannot be very sure whether this is the figure. But the other worrying part is that is industry demanding power to the full extent that it needs to? There is certainly some doubt on that count, because the PLF of the coal-based generating stations is currently only 58%. Now that is a very worrying sign. If we have to lift GDP, we need more power, we need more, that's electricity today we're talking about, and electricity for running industry. Industry has to grow, but it must get power at a price that it can afford to be competitive. You cannot use coal or electricity as a cash cow. Today, Indian coal is one of the highest taxed commodities in the world, as far as coal is concerned. And we have veterans from the sector sitting here. It vouched for that. I think 60% is what the taxes and cesses come to. Now, the more you tax coal, the more expensive power becomes. And in our syndrome of providing more expensive power to industry, the more uncompetitive Indian industry will become. So that is, I think, one lesson that we have to learn. Coal is our energy security, though it's a fossil fuel. But the message I think that has to go out is that we have to use coal in a much cleaner way. We've come out with an environmental regulation which is supposed to be effective from 2017 January, which has rightly tightened the norms for SOx and NOx and particulate matter emissions. Maybe a little too tight. They did not take into account the objections given by the generators and the time frame that was required. But what is more important in today's context is that if we are to redo these plants, rejig them to meet the environmental norms, certainly it cannot be done by 1st January 2017. That time limit will have to be extended probably by a year. But it costs money. And if we do not provide subsidies to get this job done, it could well mean that power tariffs could go up anywhere between 80 paise to 1 rupee 25 paise a unit. So even assuming that it will be an average of 1 rupee, do you think that the Indian economy or the Indian consumer can afford these higher tariffs and still remain competitive? There is an alternative. The government has imposed a clean environment cess, which was earlier the energy cess. Almost 30,000 crores are to be collected annually on this count. Now there was a debate that 50% of this is to be diverted for cleaning the Ganga river. Well, I'm one of those who said no. I think the job is to clean the energy sector first, and preferably that which is coming out from coal. We want cleaner coal. And if this 30,000 crores is diverted urgently to cleaning up the power stations to meet the new environmental norms, I think that will be a very good job done. Of course, a portion of it can also go for building up the grid that is required for putting your renewables across. And we have set a very good and ambitious target for ourselves for 175 gigawatts of renewables within a short time span of 2022. Very good target. But we must realize that the renewables give a PLF, the ones that we are talking about, the new renewables, only about 30%. Maximum, 20 to 30%. So this, as compared to a coal-based capacity or a nuclear capacity, will mean 1/3 of that capacity that you have on the other side. So if you are to divide 175 megawatts by a factor of 3, you actually end up with only 60 gigawatts. 175 gigawatts, divided by 3, about 60 gigawatts, is what is the comparable energy or electricity that is going to be available. There are about 60,000 megawatts of power plants that are under construction and waiting to be commissioned. Now, unless this PLF goes up, they are going to be in some kind of a distress. And this distress, mind you, of the power sector is directly impact the financial sector, because 70 to 80% of money invested in any of these projects is from the financial institutions. And one who's going to get the hardest hit are the financial institutions unless we pay our attention to making these plants run to full capacity. It's only then that they can produce power which is affordable and generate enough finances to be able to repay their loans. The exposure of the power sector is colossal. I have some figures here which tend to indicate what will be the impacts. The bank exposures, as reported by RBI statistics, outstanding bank credit to power sector as on 30th September 2016 was 5.3 lakh crores. Then the power sector share in total advances is 7.82% as compared to 14.22% for the entire infrastructure sector. The power sector share in gross NPAs is almost 6% as compared to 14% for the entire infrastructure sector. So unless we take these factors into account, that we've got to address the problems of the power sector immediately, make sure that the tariff remains around 4%, 4 rupees a unit. Number two, add renewables by all means, but please do not add renewables when you are providing 90%, 80 to 90% import of the material from China. What are you doing to your own manufacturing industry? And on the other hand, a large portion of the Indian manufacturing power sector is sitting idle, waiting for orders. So these are issues which I thought that we should put before the CEO of the Niti Aayog, pertinent issues. Yes, we need a clean environment, but coal will continue to be our mainstay for a while. We need cleaner coal. Luckily, the NGT has probably put a stay on investment from this fund on the cleaning the Ganga. Those who pollute the Ganga are doing a great crime. They should be punished. Polluters should be made to pay. But please utilize these funds urgently for cleaning up the coal sector, better mining, more efficient mining. It is one of the biggest employers of the country. You cannot allow these sectors to go sick. Luckily, funds are available. Please utilize them effectively. And as far as renewable capacity is concerned, please try and ensure that we manufacture all these components in India and not provide a window for running the economy of China. We need to go fast. We also have to ensure that these renewable assets run between 25 to 30% for the life of the loans that they have taken. Otherwise, the financial sector is going to run into distress. And lastly, we want this good mix of renewables into the grid. Please spend more on modernizing the grid, making it a smart grid. And if there is surplus power beyond our own needs of the industry and others, I think there is ample use for it in the automobile sector. Vehicular movement must go electric. Because we do not want 90% import of oil. At the same time, the SOx, NOx factors that are there on the city roads with huge urbanization coming up, the message is electric vehicles as far as possible, and that will take care of our PLFs in the future. I think these are some thoughts that I wanted to give, and hopefully I think the speakers with more knowledge will come and elaborate these issues as we pass through the day. I'm really thankful to Mr. Amitabh Kant for having spared the time to be with us today and hear out some of the issues relating to the sector, which he can carry back to the Niti Aayog. Thank you very much.